This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on the Church Big Monday. Get it on, and welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. Mark Garrigus in studio.
In the studio,
Everybody.
having fun. It was, we basically continue our conversation on air, if you will, from what it is before. But we do seem to have quite a bit of fun even before we get on air.
You know, you are in my Mount Rushmore people I love talking to. And
by the way, the most laughter that I think I've ever seen out of you, and I've known you for decades, was I remember where I was at the time. I was in my office in New York, and you were regaling me with the post-Reasonable Doubt Palm Beach escapades of me. And I don't think that I've ever heard you laugh so hard or so genuinely as the pretzel roll yak low carb, high carb
backstage,
backstage
at the Improv. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, I for a guy who says a lot of funny things, I don't laugh that often.
It's true. You have a very kind of, I don't want to call it dour, but you're just you're serious. You're a serious guy.
I always first off, it always bothered me when I would see comedians start laughing at their own jokes sort of halfway into it. It felt like a weird kind of crutch or something, number one. Number two, I look at myself as like in comedy or laughter. This is going to sound super douchey, but I look at myself as like a wait, is it? Who's the a wine connoisseur?
Sommelier.
Sommelier. Yeah. I don't take a
For a
sip.
second, I thought you were going to talk about the Iranian guy, Soleimani.
Yeah, I don't take a sip and go, "Ooh, this is awesome." I'm an expert. I'm going to take a little sip. I'll swish it around. Maybe I'll raise a brow, set it back down. So that's how I look at comedy. You're not supposed to laugh at all your stuff.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, in the decades I've known you, there was about a good 8 minutes where the unbridled joy of your laughter at the image of me post thing,
I know,
apparently touched kind of a childlike nerve.
I got going. I was at a wedding.
Yeah, that's right. You were at a wedding. I forgot about that. You were at somebody's wedding, and we were talking out of nowhere.
And I was like, found myself standing on the beach. I'd probably had a stressful, long few days of I did 5 shows in 2 days. I was probably ready just to cut loose a little bit. But were you in kind of a Ted Cruz kind of mood? I was. Why do I get so much? I guess it's the hypocrisy. I was going to say, for those who aren't following or aren't in the weeds, Texas is having a horrific time right now. I mean, it's just awful. I mean, there's been some heroes too. I was watching an interview with a guy who owns a mattress, Jack Mattress or something, who had opened it up, and he's got 300 people in there. Ted Cruz decided to take his family and go to, where was it? Cancun.
The Ritz.
Oh yeah, the Ritz in Cancun.
And at first the first story was, mind you, in the middle of this just awful situation in Texas. The first story was, I'm going to go down to escort my daughters for whatever.
Right.
And to come right back. Then, and this is the part that made me think about you. In fact, Tenny and I were having this game. One of Heidi Cruz's girlfriends dimed them out. And there's a joint text. And the joint text has got lovelies on the text. So it's her group of her girlfriends, right?
Right.
So Tenny and I were doing the over and under on which of Paulette's friends would have dimed her out first. So who would you say on Lynette? If it were you and Lynette, you just told a whopper about, I'm taking the kids on this, and then boom, the texts come out, and it's like, who wants to go? I'm getting a good rate.
I've narrowed it down between Jody and Suzanne, but those are the only friends of hers I know. I've had lots of conversations with Lynette where she's like, I know all your friends. You don't know my friends. I go, my friends are the most interesting people on the fucking planet. Your friends are just people you remember from high school. Yeah, my friends are Mark Garagos and Jimmy Kimmel. Like, of course you want to hang out with those guys.
It's just, and then Cruz came back and I just saw something where he was doing an interview and, if somebody should advise him, dude, just what's our usual advice?
Lay low.
Lay low. Wait 24 hours. Somebody else is going to do something more stupid, and you're just doubling down on stupidity.
Well, also let them play handball against the curtains. You know what I mean? Just don't bounce back at them because there's two things wrong. One is there's more sound bites of you now talking about this.
Right.
Two, inevitably you change your story. It goes from I was going to go down there for a little vacation to I was escorting my kids down there, which, again, is super dubious because who needs to get on an airplane and go to Cancun just to see their kids get off the airplane?
Right. I'll take them to the airport. I don't think I've ever escorted Jake anywhere willingly.
Yeah, I mean, and so the conceit is you're going to land in Cancun and never leave the airport. You're going to catch the next flight,
right?
Or never leave the plane.
I'll get to customs, let them get through.
Yeah, it never works, and we're living in a world that is all optics now because practically it doesn't make a difference, but optically it's a big deal.
Right. Wait, how is it, to my mind, the three guys who probably could use some PR advice this week are Ted Cruz, Gavin Newsom, and Cuomo. All three have decided just to bounce in every direction. I mean, Cruz, we just were talking about. And then I love the people who are trying to make a distinction between Cruz and Newsom. No, there's more similarities than there are differences. Give me a break. And Cuomo, boy, are the knives coming out. I only wish, and here's where I just ask for some intellectual consistency and honesty. All the Republicans in New York State who are calling for an impeachment committee now, just remember the position you were taking when it was Trump. Now that it's Cuomo, let's see if Democrats in New York do the same thing that Republicans were doing or not.
It doesn't seem like Cuomo's got a lot of friends on either side of the aisle. I mean, he had...
Did you see de Blasio yesterday?
De Blasio threw him under the bus.
Oh, in a heartbeat.
And it evidently, and I don't really hold this against people, but it seems like he has a bit of a bully mentality.
I don't mind that at all. In fact, I kind of embrace, I like his, I don't suffer fools. He's like his father. He reminds me, same mentality my old man had, that kind of curmudgeonly, if you're too happy, it's usually because you've got a stifled intellect.
No, I don't mind that. I mean, Trump was that way. Cuomo's that way. Like, I like a politician's got a little sort of huevos, and here's how, one of the best at that in a slightly different tone is DeSantis in Florida. Somebody comes after him and he yells back at them.
By the way, if politicians were like football players, I would trade, and I was the GM of California, I would send Newsom for Cuomo and give him a first-round draft choice. I'd take Cuomo in California over Newsom in a heartbeat.
Well, Newsom is just a, Ryan Leaf. He's just a guy who never put up any numbers.
Wow,
that's an attitude issue. He's just a bust. He's big. He's good looking. He's got a strong arm. It looked like a lot of potential there. No potential. So
yeah, he's kind of there's almost a Goff quality to him.
He's got a little Goff. That's super insulting to Goff. Yeah. He's more Leaf than Goff. And
who would you put Cuomo? I'd put Cuomo. Cuomo's got kind of a Brett Favre thing going on. I mean, he can take you. He can take you a certain place. He also didn't Brett Favre get in trouble?
Sorry,
Favre.
Yeah.
Didn't he get in trouble for doing something at one point?
He
Didn't he have a misstep?
Brett
Everybody's
Favre.
always
I
gonna
think
he's had a couple
maybe
things.
there's a little dalliance,
or maybe it's
something.
a Ben in Pittsburgh.
Well, Big Ben.
Big
publicly,
Ben.
He's
had his.
He got a little sketchy in a bathroom with a co-ed. Favre sent some pictures of a part of your body you probably don't send, and then more recently, Favre got sort of tricked into saying some Nazi stuff on the site Cameo.
Oh, really?
Really? I didn't know about it. God,
Yeah,
Gary.
it was
now we're talking. Gary is giving some good contributions.
Yeah. It was extremely coded, but on Cameo you can tell someone like, "Hey, send a birthday message to my friend John, and tell him and then you can say inside jokes or whatever." Well, somebody used some coded weird wording that turned out was not kosher, and he had to apologize.
do you look at Newsom as more Ryan Leaf? Clearly, you don't think, or Carson Wentz.
I would not put Newsom in the category of anyone who's been in the league and put up any numbers at all. I don't feel like he's put up any numbers at all. I have him in the bus.
But doesn't he remind you of those quarterbacks that just hang around for a long time in the league?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he does have a little that kind of journeyman vibe to him. But those guys still have to come off the bench and win a game every once in a while.
Well, clearly, if he was a QB, you would have benched this guy, right?
Oh, yeah. I would have benched him if he was the long snapper. He's now in a weird position, which is the legislators basically said we're not opening up schools for a long time because they're in with the teachers unions. Newsom realizes that he's in the middle of a recall and that optically everyone wants schools to reopen.
Right.
I mean, it's now every day that goes by is more parents get pissed off and more states around the country open or reopen their school, and even the Biden administration they're kind of waffling on it, but the CDC and Fauci, you're starting to lose everybody.
Well, we talked endlessly, and I always said the reason I talked endlessly about outdoor dining is because I thought that was a tipping point. Schools now are becoming a tipping point, clearly. And when I say tipping point, it's one of the things that unites both sides, because you cannot just have – I saw something Drew tweeted earlier today just about the damage we've done to basically a generation of kids. And there's absolutely no science behind it. It was just pure panic porn. And finally – we're coming in on, 4 weeks from the 1-year anniversary. And now all of a sudden, these legislators, like New York, the legislature there is going to claw back their emergency powers that they delegated. Mm-hmm. Now they're talking about it in California. It's like, where was the legislative branch? Okay, we had this 1-year crazy experiment in certain states of the legislature just deciding to go into hibernation.
I heard a study today that said this thing has dropped off so hard in like the last several weeks that they're starting to think there's herd immunity. Like they cannot figure out or calculate why it's dropped off so fast and why it spiked so hard, and they're trying to compare it to, Well, things.
Gary, find that chart. There's a chart that's got California, New York, Florida, and it puts the dates of various closures. If you read the articles on this, and I listened to Biden's new COVID czar, who's a very thoughtful doctor, and they asked, and of course, I watched him, I think, on MSNBC, and I hate to say it, but nobody was doing a cross-examination. I mean, let alone, can we not have some softballs? Just ask a simple question. Okay, everybody told us Christmas and New Year's was going to spike again. We were going to have a surge on surge, right? What happened? January 11th, it fell off a table. Yes. Which, by the way, less than 2 weeks from New Year's.
Yeah, look, the answer is no answers. Nobody knows what this thing is, how it works. No one has been able to get their hands on it or around it. And so Florida, I think Florida's take was nobody knows anything about this, so we're going to stay open. California's take was nobody knows anything about this, so we're going to shut everything down. My feeling is, well, as long as no one knows anything, why don't we stay open? And it turns out us in Florida really been the same. Florida's, well, we're not the same. Florida's been open the whole time. So now Newsom's got to deal with his recall, and he's got to deal with the legislators and the teachers' unions, and now he's got to go against the teachers' unions, and because it's optically going to look horrible for him if we get to the recall date and schools are still closed. I think, the lightning in a bottle that will happen here. I know everybody, the conventional wisdom is you get the LA Times doing op-eds that say this is insanity. When it hit 1 million signatures, they wrote an op-ed. The editor's board actually said, this is insanity. Why are we going to waste the money for a special election? Now all of a sudden they're concerned about wasting money. By the way, the LA Times is concerned about wasting money as we're blowing holes into every municipal budget because of the idiotic shutdowns that have absolutely no science, and they've tried everything. And by the way, all the people who are elected outsourced it to unelecteds. Put that aside for a second. The conventional wisdom is, there's nobody who's going to challenge him and win. And I agree. No traditional Republican. John Cox can give $1 million. He can give $10 million. It's not going to matter. Faulkner from San Diego, it's not going to matter. You know who could? I've got somebody, a very close friend of ours, who I think if there's 2 questions on the ballot, should we recall Gavin Newsom? I think you're going to get over 50% who say yes. Mm-hmm. Then the next question is, in a plurality, who should it be? There'll probably be 100 names on that ballot. Mm-hmm. I think Dr. Drew should run. I do too.
Because I'll tell you something. Number one, what are the 2 biggest problems in California? COVID issues related to shutdowns and not understanding what you're doing. And he would not outsource his brain to, can you imagine Drew outsourcing his brain to Dr. Farrar or Gali or somebody else?
No.
Never in a million years. Number 2, homelessness. Drew understands homelessness better than anybody I know and understands that it's at its root not a housing issue. And Drew, by the way, is sensible. He's got a little bit of that celebrity kind of image, the cachet. I think he's the perfect candidate for governor.
Well, I would be his traffic czar because I have so many goddamn thoughts about traffic that drive me insane.
You know what I would do? I'd be his appointment secretary so that I could determine which judges and which people get appointed to stuff. And I would also ask him, just give me one other thing where I could just slash and burn certain agencies in the state of California that have absolutely no right to be around.
I was watching Trump's lawyers being interviewed last week, and that's all right. I told Gary to look for it, but it's having trouble, but I'll just paraphrase. And they talked to, I was thinking of you, because they talked to the first lawyer, the one that got lambasted for, weak sauce at the top thing. And he said, and I wanted to run this by you. So he said that was an audible. So they weren't planning on doing what he was doing. They were planning on presenting something else, but at the last moment, they had to go and call an audible. So he wasn't prepared. But he kept saying he had to cool the room. So he went in. They thought, let's cool the room. Everyone thought he did a horrible job because I think that not you, but others wanted him to be aggressive and on the offense and whatever. But he kept saying I had to cool the room. And then we could get into our case. Said,
if you watched it, there was a very emotional, I thought very well done video montage or clip that the House managers presented. Anybody who looked at that, you would get emotional. I don't care what side, as long as you weren't anesthetized. But after that, I watched him. I did not think that he was as bad or horrific as it was portrayed. I thought, as I told you, he was doing extemporaneously. I thought he talked, which is a skill set, extemporaneously, and he did precisely that. And then fast forward to the guy that I wanted to talk to, which was Vanderveer from Philadelphia, who has been excoriated everywhere. In fact, he had to resign from the Philadelphia trial lawyers. And for all the people who are excoriating him, you do have a duty to zealously defend your client. Now, you can argue whether or not you have to represent your client. I get that. Your choice of representing a client, and I've represented some of the most hated people in history. But the fact is, once you sign on for a client, this idea that somehow you're going to fact check rhetoric is just mind-boggling to me. I mean, what are you talking about? You're trying to be persuasive. You're an advocate. Your job is not there to surgically or in laser-like focus dissect as you would hope a judge would. And by the way, this is not a courtroom. They held the trial at the crime scene, and it was the crime scene, right, with the victims as judges or jurors, and the victims as also communicating with the defense as the House managers were communicating with the prosecution, which, the Democrats. So stop trying. And by the way, one of the things I thought the House managers did well was this 404B style evidence was to use Michigan. Well, I'm making analogies, but this is not a courtroom. This is not what you would see in a courtroom. Everybody would have been recused if this was a real courtroom. You would not be able to have jurors who are consulting with the defense lawyer. You wouldn't be able to have the prosecution consulting with jurors. You wouldn't be able to have, you wouldn't do it at a crime scene. In fact, you get a jury instruction in a real trial which would say you're not to visit the scene of the crime, and you're to avoid that area.
What are your, I know. Well, we've talked about it as it pertains to you, but now as it kind of pertains to Trump. This thing of we don't want people to represent people we don't like, and if they do represent those people, we're going to desecrate their home or harangue them or yell at them when they go out to eat with their family. This is very slippery slope. This is a very slippery slope, people. Be careful what you ask for. So in your world, somebody's going to be the overseer of who's worthy of having legal representation, competent legal representation, and we're going to base it on their personality or traits.
I haven't studied every oath in every state, but I will tell you the California oath is that you're to zealously defend your client at the risk of harm to yourself. That's your oath. Well, so don't talk to me about duty of candor to the court. Yes, you have a duty of candor to the court, but at the same time, I'm not here to tell my client, or they shouldn't be there to tell their client. And by the way, you're going to see this because it's only a matter of time. There was an article today that I think his name, Gary, is Mark Pomerantz, who's a white-collar defense lawyer in New York, and I saw it in my feed today, took a leave of absence from his law firm to join the Manhattan DA's office. That, I'm telling you, I know people tweet at me all the time, oh, I thought you said he was going to get prosecuted. No guy is taking a leave of absence from his white-collar law firm to go to a state or a county DA's office. Trump is going to, or the Trump organization is going to get criminally indicted. It's going to happen. Every earmark, everything I've ever sensed in my career, you're going to see happen. And that is a telltale sign. Gary, did I get his name right?
You got his name right. And the article, one of the articles that comes up when you search for it notes that he's an ex-John Gotti Jr. prosecutor, and he has already interviewed Michael Cohen.
Yeah. And so I'm telling you, the handwriting's on the wall. And so I know what's going to happen. Let me give a prediction. Trump's going to hire a lawyer. All of a sudden, that lawyer's going to be vilified. How can you do this? How can you defend somebody? Hello, that's our system. I thought everybody who wants to talk about the Constitution should remember that's our system.
Well, it's funny. They would say, they go, well, of course, everyone's entitled to representation. And then it's like, but don't be zealous about it.
Right, exactly. But not that good. Not that good of a defense.
All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, I've got a lot of questions about the George Floyd trial, which is coming up. The cops, I don't know what the dates are for that. I've heard little bits and pieces.
I didn't notice. It got swallowed up. Maybe Gary can take a look whether or not the continuance got granted.
No. I believe that they're preparing to do the trial in the next few weeks. I'll try to find you guys an exact date when we get back.
All right, we'll do that right after this. All right, back with Reasonable Doubt. So the
best
Floyd thing,
best hour in the universe, by the way.
the George Floyd thing. I don't know what they're going for. They're going for murder.
They're going for murder. Minnesota's got a different statutory scheme than most states in terms of degrees. And it was interesting because the AG, Keith Ellison, who some people may know in a previous life or a previous career, when he came in, he either re-indicted or refiled because the first charges weren't going to stick. It was obvious. So,
what were the first charges?
First charges was a different degree, which didn't allow for the ability to, I think, convict all of the officers themselves. But I think there's
March 8th.
Yeah, is it March 8th?
Says. Yeah, so it's coming up.
But I thought that, maybe this is the thing. Gary, I thought the last thing I read is that the defense was not agreeing, or at least one of the defendants was not agreeing to the continuance. The prosecution wanted the continuance.
I don't know how they're going to get the other cops. Maybe, certainly the officer with the knee on the neck. I don't know what they're going to do with the other cops.
I'm just fascinated.
I think they're going to have a hard time with them.
Yeah, the cop with
especially since like two of them were rookies.
First week on the job.
Was that two of them?
Two of them.
Yeah.
The Derek, who is the lead defendant,
Chauvin.
I am very, very curious, and I'm not in the weeds. It may be out there and I missed it, but I'm very curious as to whether the prosecution is going to argue that he had animus based on the fact that he and Floyd worked at the same place and had a history. I'm very curious about that.
Mark, I recall seeing the story you saw about the defense not agreeing, but I'm seeing multiple articles here that say that jury selection starts March 8th and the trial, the opening arguments are scheduled no earlier than March 29th.
Well, that would make sense because there still is apparently in Minnesota, unlike in California, a Speedy Trial Act. Because here in California, there is no. We've had the writ of habeas corpus has basically been suspended. Nobody seems to care that hasn't happened since the Civil War. But in California, it's like who cares? But Minnesota, I would assume, has not gone to that extreme. And so if the defense says we're not going to waive our speedy trial rights and the prosecution wants to continue, absent an extraordinary showing of good cause, a judge would not go along with that.
How, if you're defending Chauvin, how far do you go in George Floyd and the vilification of villainizing of George Floyd? George Floyd was a bad dude. There's plenty stories of him holding a gun to a pregnant woman's, when they broke into her house and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff about having a lot of fentanyl in him and trying to get him into the car, and he wouldn't get into the car. How far down the road is there this danger? Let's put it to you this way. You're trying to defend your client for rape. The woman who's claiming of rape has worked in the porn industry for 5 years. But it's a tightrope because you can't really, you got to be careful just about how much you impugn her, right? While trying to get this guy off. Now, you're going to upset a lot of people if you start essentially vilifying Floyd.
Yeah, but this is what.
But how much of that is relevant?
It's a great question. Years ago, I'll start it with a story, and then I'll tell you what will come in. Years ago, there was a case in Pasadena at the Superior Court. It was a rape case, and the victim, or the complaining witness, as I like to say, was a prostitute. And the gravamen of the offense is that the guy had picked her up, that he had paid for a blowjob, but midway through the blowjob wanted to fuck, and she didn't want to fuck.
Having a friend of mine in Tijuana, but they just charge him double, and they got done with it. There's an easy out.
So midway through the trial, I remember the judge, I remember the prosecutor, because it became a kind of a story in the Star News. The judge, at the close of the prosecution's case, dismissed the case. He dismissed the case. He said, this is a contract dispute. She wanted more money to engage in full intercourse as opposed to a blowjob. He got all kinds
Hold on, they got to know that's an upsell.
Huh?
That's an upsell with prostitutes, because every guy I know.
That's basically what the judge did.
Every
who
guy
is dead
I know,
now, and I won't mention his name.
Every guy I know who's not operating a motor vehicle, who starts with a blowjob, about mid blowjob, goes, "Yeah, I'd like to upgrade."
Yeah, I'm going from here to there. And the judge,
what
judge
happened
said,
to my friend in Tijuana?
Yeah, and it's a contract dispute. It's not rape. So what ended up happening, I could go through a lot of it. There became the rape shield law. You can't bring in that stuff. A woman's sexual history generally does not come in, absent certain factors. So fast forward to George Floyd. Prior acts are generally going to be verboten. You're not going to get it in. However, that's why I asked the question. It's amazing how you intuitively hone in on what I'm saying. I said I'm very curious as to whether the prosecution brings in that they had a history. Because if the prosecution brings in that they had a history because they worked together.
Chauvin and Floyd at the same club at
then
security.
Chauvin's mental state becomes an issue because he knew this guy. If he can articulate that he knew certain things about Floyd, a judge is going to be hard-pressed to exclude that, especially if Chauvin takes the stand.
Oh, all right. So,
but if Chauvin does not take the stand or does not, there's no extrinsic evidence of him knowing these certain things, then he's got a problem. Now, Chauvin is not taking the stand. Chauvin has seen all of the discovery. As Scalia pointed out in one of his opinions, the defendant, the one area where the defendant does have some, kind of evens the scales is a defendant sees all the discovery, knows what everybody's going to say, knows what the evidence is, and doesn't normally have to testify until the end. Mm-hmm. He can, he gets up there, he could say, yeah, I knew this guy, I could suspect that he had fentanyl in him because of his superhuman strength, or he wouldn't listen to me, or I looked at his eyes that were glassy and they weren't tracking. And by the way, this is a cop who has testified numerous times, probably has strayed from the truth on more than one occasion, but knows that most people aren't going to call him on that, and that most people come into a courtroom and assume the cops are telling the truth.
All right, so let me just be clear. Floyd, who had a criminal history and a somewhat potentially violent criminal history, again, holding a gun to a pregnant woman in her house, is probably not going to sit well with females or males in the jurors. But that wouldn't be admissible.
They're going to say that would be classic character evidence, even though the person is deceased. They're going to just say it's irrelevant, it's more prejudicial than probative.
But if Chauvin says, I knew this guy from the club, I knew he was a bad guy, I heard
the stories. That went into my thinking as to why I kept my knee on him, because I was afraid that he had fentanyl in him. He had this superhuman strength. The crowd was forming around me. I didn't want to let him go because I was afraid, blah, blah, blah. And that also fits in, by the way, there is probably what's called a joint defense agreement, meaning that all the lawyers are talking amongst themselves. And in that way, they're communicating.
Both sides are talking.
Meaning, no, not with the prosecution. Joint defense would be the four officers' lawyers.
Sorry. All their lawyers. Yes.
So if there is the rookie who's saying, the rookie as long as you don't want to, their old expression, hang together or hang separately. If the rookie is saying, well, I didn't know what was going on, this is my commanding officer, or this is the officer senior on the scene. And if one of the other guys says, well, I had my back to them, I couldn't see what was happening, but he was shouting this or that, and I heard the shouting, and I didn't hear I can't breathe, or something like that. And they've, I'm sure, studied all the video, so they know exactly how they can be impeached by the video. They have probably refined their testimony to fit with the video, and at the same time, I would be hard pressed to believe that Chauvin will go to trial and not take the stand. I think he will take the stand. I think he figures, I've testified before, I know all the evidence, and that's the only way I'm getting out of this case.
So what is the prosecution going for with Chauvin?
Gary, what did the second indictment, was it third degree or second degree? I forget the degrees. I'm not skilled in Minnesota.
And are you worried that they set the bar too high and then they cannot clear it?
Well, the idiosyncrasies of the homicide statutes there were such that I don't think they could have pursued the conspiracy on the lesser non-malice murder. So I think the prosecution was looking ahead to see exactly how they were going to be able to indict all of the cops and at the same time not get thrown out halfway through. Because this judge has shown that he's not afraid of public opinion.
Do you feel that it hurts? And this is all just instinct. I have no idea. I've never even thought about this. Do you feel like it may diminish the case by spreading themselves too thin, by going after guys that were really wrong place, wrong time, rookie guys, not really a provable case? So I'm meaning, should they put all their focus on Chauvin? That's the guy we got the video of with the knee on the neck. Everyone else looks confused, and it's their third day, and you're going to spend a bunch of calories, and then you're also going to kind of suggest, tell me if this makes a difference. When you're going after the confused Asian guy who's there for his third day, and really, you could say he should have done something, but you're going to have a hard time convicting that guy. Does it appear to the jurors that you're just going out with too broad a stroke? Like, hey, if you're going after the guy who didn't do anything, maybe the guy who did do something didn't do anything.
Well,
does it dilute your point a little bit?
It does, but at the same time, they're probably, from the prosecution standpoint, they're probably figuring, look, if we cast a wide enough net, we may be able to get a compromise verdict where they can acquit, because that happened with Rodney King. They acquitted 2, they convicted 2. And that happened after a public outcry, because remember, all 4 were acquitted at first in Sylmar in the state court, and then the feds came in.
Simi Valley?
Yeah.
Or Sylmar?
Oh, Simi Valley, yeah.
Right. And then they took it to L.A. or
then
something?
Then they took it to L.A. Central District. One of my favorite stories was the 2 of the lawyers were sitting at the defense table during the federal trial. And one lawyer, they took a break, and one lawyer said something about having to use the restroom. And the other lawyer, who will remain nameless, said, wow, you could be a federal judge. You've got a strong bladder and a weak mind. And apparently the microphone was on, and the judge heard it in his chambers and came barreling out, which has always been one of my favorite stories.
Finished taking a piss, and then so what are they going after?
Yeah, Gary, what'd you find?
So to answer Mark's question from a few minutes ago, he was originally charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. And a few weeks later, a different attorney took over, a different prosecutor took over and amended the charges to include unintentional second-degree murder, alleging that Floyd was killed by Chauvin in the course of committing assault in the third degree. And we have another story here that is much more recent, where it appears that there was an attempt to reinstate the second-degree murder charges. Third-degree murder charges, rather, that were originally changed, and that was denied by the judge.
And the second degree, how did they characterize it? Because that sounds like what would be in California an implied malice second-degree murder.
It says here that the charges were amended to include unintentional second-degree murder under the felony murder doctrine, alleging that Chauvin killed Floyd in the course of committing assault in the third degree.
So that's interesting because one of the things that you've seen in California, where we arguably are the most progressive in some of our criminal justice reform, is we have in recent years whittled away both statutorily and through the case law at the felony murder. If you did not intentionally kill somebody, then having you held liable under felony murder, we've chipped away at that. Here, they're using the unintentional, which would be like implied malice. In California, the comparable situation would be an involuntary manslaughter or a second-degree implied malice murder. The interesting thing about it is if you read the jury instructions, it's basically you do something with negligence that results in a death, okay, or extreme negligence. So that can be, even though you don't have the malice element by intent, we're inferring it. We're saying you were so negligent that we're going to imply that you had malice.
So this is how we get from manslaughter to second
murder.
degree to murder,
Right.
because manslaughter is you killed someone but you didn't mean it. This is, well, he didn't mean it, but he was so negligent that you can get to murder.
And here, the reason why that makes such a huge difference is if there's no weapon involved. I think last time I looked, invol is maxed out at 4 years. It's a 2, 3, 4. Second degree murder is 15 to life.
Involuntary manslaughter.
It says here, regarding the amended charges, that Minnesota sentencing guidelines recommend 12 and a half years imprisonment for conviction.
I think they're going to have a hard time prosecuting this, and I'll tell you why. There's a lot of footage of George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe," long before the knee was on the neck. He was saying he couldn't breathe getting in and out of the police car. I think he was in the police car. He was in the cruiser for a minute. He needed to get out. So I think the problem is the public saw the end of the tape. And the horrific image of the knee on the neck for 8 minutes and 40 some odd seconds. But they haven't really seen the beginning part of the tape. In the beginning part of the tape, they were treating him decently. They were trying to get him into the car, and he was saying, "I can't breathe." And I don't think it's ever good for the prosecution to have the person saying whatever it is you're accusing this guy of killing him of 10 minutes later, saying it before that. You know, it's almost like saying, you murdered this guy because you stabbed him, but now there's footage of him with a knife in him from 10 minutes earlier, kind of thing. It's not completely analogous, but it is a hurdle, I think, for the prosecution to get over, because he announced many times he couldn't breathe while he was standing.
This is what you've got, which is fascinating to me in terms of just doing an legal analytics. Normally, it's next to impossible to convict a cop of murder in a courtroom in America. I mean, I've sat there in courtrooms and watched. It's just jurors can't get their heads around it. Then you've got the countervailing here in that this has morphed into a kind of a siren song for criminal justice reform, and sparked an outroar and uproar. And so, as with all cases, this is going to come down to jury selection. I will be able to, we will do it. I'll prognosticate based on the jury selection and what they say as to what's going to happen in this case.
I'm going to tease this, but how many points can we count on? I don't mean points, percentage points. That jury has to know that if they acquit, their city's going to burn.
Well, L.A.
So is L.A.
How many times we watched it in L.A.?
So is Well, the good news is L.A. will burn while Minneapolis burns, while Chicago burns, while New York burns.
Oh, L.A. will be a tinderbox.
How much? I want to be, and I'm curious that this doesn't factor in as much as I would think it would. And obviously, the attorneys aren't allowed to say anything. But what I'm saying is if I'm sitting with that group, I'm going, look, maybe the prosecution didn't put up an ironclad case. We come up with a verdict to acquit. The school your kid goes to is going to burn down. What do you own? You own a market? That's going. You own a liquor store? You own a car wash? It's going. It's all going. Why don't we just put this guy in for 7 years and we can all get out of here? I'm going to tease it because I do a spot, but that has to factor. It would just have to factor in. The question is, how much does it factor in? First, I'll tell you about Chamonix. That's right. Genucel. There you go. Puffiness and bags under the eyes are the hardest things to get rid of until now. Genucel. Plant stem cell therapy from Chamonix specifically targets eye puffiness and bags as well. Incredibly powerful natural serum guaranteed to show results in as little as 12 hours. So put it on and go to bed and see some results before you wake up. Lynette loves this stuff. She swears by it. 8 extra ingredients to reduce appearance of bags and puffiness. Plus, Genucel uses patented plant stem cell technology to improve longevity and long-term results. Try Genucel risk-free. Just go to Genucel.com/Adam. Enter the special promo code Adam40 at checkout. Right, Gary?
That's absolutely right. Say goodbye to puffiness and bags today. From now until Mother's Day, get the legendary Genucel XV face cream absolutely free. Chamonix, the best skincare, best results, or your money back. That's Genucel.com/Adam. GENUCEL.com/Adam.
So last thought, Mark, how much, what, if you were to give it a percentage, if you thought you could put a couple of points on it, like, I don't know, it's like you say, I'm betting a football game, seems to be a pick'em type game, but the Packers are at home. So I give them 2 points for being at home.
This is the problem. It all depends on whether the jury is sequestered or not. The best shot to get a fair trial in a high-profile, highly charged case, and when I say a fair shot, to get something resembling as a presumption is you have to sequester the jury, not just during deliberations, during the entire case. They have to get out of the community when they've got such an electrifying atmosphere. If they're not sequestered, I always will go for the conviction because I just think people are influenced by what the community fervor is. The community fervor, when it's a case involving people who are infamous, and clearly the officers are infamous, they're not famous. This isn't somebody who's got a celebrity, who's got a following or constituency. These are cops who are infamous. Absent sequestering this jury, I don't see how Chauvin ever gets acquitted.
Will they be sequestered?
I don't think so. I don't think this judge is going to do it.
He's not going to do it, and also, so we will know their names?
They will keep the jury questionnaires generally under seal until afterwards, but the intrepid reporters will figure it out in the interim. I mean, I can't tell you, every high-profile case I've ever tried, the reporters knew more about the jurors than I did, and I knew their names and was doing the background checks.
I got to say, if I'm a defense attorney for Chauvin, I'm like, we have to be sequestered and no one can ever know these people, because these people, if they do vote to acquit, they're going to have to move. I mean, you couldn't expect someone who lives in that community to vote to acquit and not expect their life to be completely disrupted and possibly more.
It's interesting that they did not agree with the prosecution's request to continue it, because kind of like what we talk about, or we started off today with Ted Cruz, just shut up and keep your head down for a day or two until something else comes along. The one thing that generally helps in these high-profile cases is time.
Yes.
And why would you want to rush into this right now?
The only reason you might want to do it during COVID. You might not want to lead the news for a week. You know what I mean? Like maybe if there's something going on that is big enough that you can kind of slide under a little bit.
Except right
that's
now,
all I can think of.
There is such pent-up demand for trial coverage in the media. I mean, when you think about it, we haven't had a supersized trial in the media in so long that I just think what will happen is if you do it now, especially as COVID is going off a cliff, that this is going to just become one of those trials of the century, so to speak.
Yep. Well, we'll see if they let the National Guard, they can release them from the Capitol to go out and guard some liquor stores and taco stands. All right, Friday and Saturday, Oklahoma City, Bricktown Comedy Club. I'll be doing stand-up there, and I'll do live pods there as well. And I got stand-up all over the place, Reno and West L.A. and Waukegan, Illinois, and Royal Oak and Kansas City.
Wow, you are all over the country.
Yeah, I like to spread the mirth. And you can check out the stand-up for free at youtube.com/Adam Carolla. What do you got, Mark?
I got Prova. We're open again, both in Times Square and at Grand Central Terminal. Engine Company 28, outside, outdoors, dining, and 10E, Mediterranean tapas. And come by the V. We've opened Gigi's for brunch. Psst, don't tell anybody because we haven't had our grand opening yet, but come by and try the brunch on weekends.
So, till next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garriga saying mahala.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.